Let's look at how we play out a timeline to a VTR deck. The process is quite straightforward and happens under the VTR tab and then the VTR playout sub-tab. We have our familiar jog and shuttle controls here, the same as the capture controls. And over here we effectively have where on the timeline we want to start playing to the VTR and where on the VTR we want to start recording. Down here we select what tracks we're going to record, and over here are the buttons that actually make everything happen. So to select what part of a timeline we want to play to tape, we use the play marks, which are these here. I use the W short key to wrap around a selection. The start and end timeline codes here are related to the in and out points, so you can see here the start and end points of the play marks directly control those numbers. To choose our in point on a tape deck, we could shuttle or jog to it and hit mark in, or we could add in a number by typing or dragging. These are also handy gadgets in that the best way of working is to synchronize the time code of the timeline to the time code of the VTR deck. So for example, let's say our tape started at 10 hours. Then it's good practice to have your real time code starting at 10 hours also. The reason being that then, wherever this cursor is, this time code is actually relating to exactly where that frame will end up on tape. In order to synchronize the timeline and the VTR deck, this gadget will grab the time code that you're currently parked on and set the real time code to be that number. So for example, if I pressed it now because we're on a 0 time code, we can see that our origin time code has gone to 0. The sync timeline to tape function is also very handy. When I push it, as you can see, it's actually disabled the start and end codes of the timeline. The reason being that now your in and out points of these markers will actually control both. Because if you synchronize the timeline time code to the VTR time code, then they're always going to be the same anyway. And this is good practice because if you've just, for example, laid out this entire master to tape, and then perhaps you go back and just want to make a small alteration to one of the shots, you can simply wrap the play markers around it, and as you can see, the in point for the VTR is automatically adjusted. So I now know that if I were to press edit, this shot would be dropped into exactly the right location on tape. So in insert mode, we can choose to insert video or any of the audio channels. You'll notice we can also insert time code. It doesn't really make much sense inserting time code, which is why it's the only item that remains available to us if we were to switch to assemble editing. I'll come back to how we can use this shortly. Over here are our go and do it buttons. This play and record button is the same as pressing play and record on your VTR. Needless to say, that's a bit dangerous, but fortunately it does come up with a warning so you can't accidentally do it. You can preview what you're about to do, in which case the deck will pre-roll and go through the editing process without actually recording anything. Or you can commit the recording and press edit, in which case the deck will pre-roll, the monitor cursor will jump back to the first frame of our output, and as it passes the in point on the record deck, it'll start to play. And at any point in those proceedings we can hit cancel if we think it's not going to do the right thing. So that's the method of playing out a master, where of course we'll be laying down a program starting at a given time code and running all the way through. There's an alternative as well which we might use if we're playing out rushes. For example, perhaps we've taken in unedited footage and graded it, and now we want to put it back down on tape, but we actually want to honor the original time codes of the original source clips. So we also have a process for doing that. So I'm just going to load up a timeline of rushes. So here we have some rushes that have been graded, and as we can see from the time codes, they have the original source codes, but they also jump backwards. Now, needless to say, if I played that out to tape and had the tape slave to these time codes, it's going to cause a lot of problems in a future conform, because a tape deck wouldn't expect to have to go into fast forward to go from 16 hours to 10 hours. So the autoconform process would be very laborious. So what we can do is, under Edit and Macros, use Linearize. So what that has done is made sure that all the time codes are now ascending only. And then when we come to play out to tape, again back to VTR, if I were to select Assemble and timecode, and so long as, of course, the deck is wired up to receive timecode from Mistika, and there's a note about that in the manual, then the deck can record these clips and take these timecodes as it goes. Now, needless to say, if there's a jump in a timecode, that can also play havoc with the editing process. So in fact, under VTR setup, we also have a function here of pre and post handles. In this case, it's set to 7 seconds, which basically means that rather than play this timeline out as you see it, if Mistika senses that it's sending a jump in timecode, it will add 7 seconds, in this case, of black to the outgoing clip with its timecode carrying on counting up. Then it will go through the timecode break. Then it will add 7 seconds of black before the next clip, preceding its new timecode. So that way we can be sure that when we come to autoconform later from tape, we're able to get every frame that we've graded, and we don't lose the first couple of seconds because we can't pre-roll to it.